Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea and the United States are entering 2026 with a recalibrated alliance, one that's no longer limited to military deterrence, but is increasingly defined by technology, trade, and nuclear coordination. Under President Lee Jae Myung's push for pragmatic diplomacy, Seoul has secured U.S. backing on sensitive issues like uranium enrichment and submarine development. But Washington's latest national security strategy notably omits any mention of North Korea, raising the stakes for how Pyongyang will be addressed moving forward. As power dynamics shift across Northeast Asia, South Korea faces growing expectations from its ally. Now the question is, how far can and should the alliance go? For answers to this, we are thrilled to connect to Victor Cha, the Korea Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. A big welcome.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Chow, let's start with the overall picture first. So, since launching in June last year, the Lee Jae Myung administration has emphasized a national interest first, pragmatic diplomacy approach in dealing with the United States and all. How would you assess the Lee administration's overall diplomatic direction towards Washington first so far?
Well, I think it's been very proactive. It has been non-ideological in a sense. And it's really sought to make big steps forward in the alliance relationship because I think President Lee realizes that President Trump is not a conventional U.S. president and that he's willing to go beyond certain boundaries that previous presidents might have stayed within. So in that sense, I think it's been a pretty proactive. And frankly, for those in Washington after his visit, in the summer and then the meeting in the fall in Gyeongju, I think President Lee surprised a lot of people in Washington. I think they were expecting a fairly progressive president, and they got one that seems to be very pro-alliance, not very ideological, very pragmatic, and wanting to move forward and make big steps in the alliance along with President Trump.
So a pragmatic and a proactive move we're seeing from the new administration here. Now, one of the outcomes that the Lee Jae Myung administration is highlighting is a stronger ROK-U.S. alliance. But from Washington's point of view, how is the alliance actually being perceived right now?
So I think it's being perceived in a pretty good light. There was some comments made by the Undersecretary for Defense at the National Day reception that the South Korean ambassador held, in which this U.S. official called Korea a model ally, in the sense that it was increasing defense spending, increasing burden sharing, and also investing a ton of money in the United States for the long term. So, I think we've come a long way from that period of 6 months after the martial law period and the absence of a president in Korea while Trump was moving forward with reciprocal tariffs and all these other things. It looked like the alliance was not in very good shape, and it's come a long, long way since then because of these very proactive steps that President Lee and President Trump have made on the whole range of issues that you just described in your opening segment.
So, Dr. Cho, when we build on that, after 2 summits last year, both sides reached a joint fact sheet and goes beyond security, of course. What does this shift from a traditional security alliance to a broader strategic alliance actually mean, and how might the role of Korea actually change?
Yeah, so I mean, first in terms of the security issues, the joint fact sheet really, if you look at it carefully, as experts do, there really are some big changes that are coming. First, the idea of conversion of wartime operational control back to South Korea, with 2026 benchmarked as one of the key moments of that transition, not to complete the transition, but to move it forward. Lots of defense spending, 3.5% on national defense by South Korea. An additional $25 billion in U.S. military equipment, $33 billion in burden sharing. These are huge numbers and major changes in the alliance relationship. The other element, of course, is this notion of the alliance becoming more of a regional alliance. In other words, affirming the idea of strategic flexibility, that there could be a regional role for U.S. forces in Korea. And then, of course, the expansion of the alliance to all of these areas based on the $350 billion investment agreement. You mentioned shipbuilding, submarines, nuclear energy, AI, quantum, chips. Really, these are major, major advances in the relationship. And if they're all carried out, it will be a transformed relationship in the near future.
Right, so this joint fact sheet really seems to signal a broader shift in the alliance framework. But as you've just touched upon, the fact sheet, it includes enriched uranium, nuclear subs, OPCON transfer as well. How do these actually affect the alliance strategic value and also efforts to deal with North Korea?
So I think in terms of the strategic value, it just appreciates the strategic value of the alliance because these are, again, all major, major steps moving forward. I think it's important that the two governments are framing this in the broader moniker of modernizing the alliance. So we're seeing more defense spending, we're seeing OPCON transition. We could even see changes in the U.S. force structure on the Korean Peninsula, the force posture, even changes in ground troops. But if it's in the context of this broadening and modernizing of the alliance, improving of South Korean military capabilities, then it doesn't invoke the same sorts of abandonment fears as simply a unilateral withdrawal or downsizing of the U.S. ground troop presence on the peninsula is. So I think it's really appreciated the strategic value of the alliance. There's still a lot of details that have been worked out. For example, on nuclear energy, a lot of the details have not been worked out on things like enrichment and reprocessing. So we still have to see how those come out, but really off to a quite impressive start once we got the fact sheet out last month.
Indeed, but Dr. Cha, you just mentioned that there are some details, some sensitive issues that needs to still be talked about in the coming days. What do you think is the most delicate factor in these talks, and how do you think South Korea should prepare for that?
Well, I would say, I mean, whenever you take the sort of steps, these sort of ambitious steps that the two allies are trying to take now, whether it's on things like nuclear energy, nuclear fuel, shipbuilding, nuclear submarines, these are major, major changes in the relationship. So there are bound to be sensitivities and lots of details that need to be worked out, entrenched interests that need to be uprooted. I mean, there's going to be a lot that they have to deal with. And so that's to be expected, right? So it is a high risk, high reward sort of thing. Probably the two most sensitive areas, and I think they're interlinked, is nuclear submarines and nuclear fuel. Nuclear fuel and the process to enrich fuel obviously has proliferation implications. And South Korea is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty regime. Has committed not to producing nuclear weapons or fissile material for nuclear weapons. If South Korea were to be the one that produces nuclear reactors and nuclear fuel, that would obviously change the nature of the agreement on nuclear energy and nuclear fuel and enrichment between the United States and South Korea. But like I said, these are very sensitive issues. They're sensitive because they are new, and they are trying to make big steps with the alliance. So we should expect that this would take some time, and that it won't necessarily be that everybody agrees on everything.
Right. So considering the complexity and the sensitiveness of this topics, we should be a little bit more patient on that. Now, let's switch a little bit to America's policy. President Trump's latest security strategy, it leaves out North Korea and denuclearization. Dr. Cha, do you think Pyongyang is being kind of downgraded, or is this part of a different strategy from Washington? How do you see it?
Right, North Korea, it wasn't mentioned in the national security strategy. I think what viewers have to understand is the national security strategy really is a 30,000-foot document, if you will. It is sort of the big, broad brushstrokes of how the United States thinks about national security. this national security strategy was different from previous ones in the way it has emphasized the Western Hemisphere primarily, and then China and other sorts of issues secondarily. And so I wouldn't really expected to see North Korea mentioned in this document. There are 3 other documents that should be coming out in the new year. These are the National Defense Strategy, the Missile Defense Review, and the Nuclear Posture Review. These are the national security documents that you would expect to make reference to North Korea. They certainly have in the past. And so if we did not see that mentioned there, then that would raise some concerns. But the fact that it hasn't showed up in the NSS is not surprising to me.
So we will have to wait for those documents to be released. Now, despite this, Seoul says both sides, Seoul and Washington, remain committed to North Korea's denuclearization. But in today's regional climate, Dr. Cha, do you think South Korea actually needs a new approach on that?
Well, this is it's a very difficult question. The United States has for 35 years trying to denuclearize North Korea. President Trump clearly wants to meet with the North Korean leader. Again, he wasn't able to meet with him when he went to APEC in Gyeongju, and people hold out hope that if he goes to China in the new year, there might be an opportunity to meet. Denuclearization, I think, is still very much on the agenda for the United States and South Korea. They've even returned to the original language that we used to use in six-party talks, which was denuclearization of North Korea, not denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which is another way of saying CVID, conventional, complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Having said that, North Korea has a lot of nuclear weapons now, and the notion that they're going to be denuclearized anytime soon is not really realistic. So what I'm saying is the United States and South Korea still can hold to denuclearization as the objective, but they clearly have to think about interim steps and new ways to engage with a North Korea that is not really interested in engaging right now because of their relationship with Russia and their support from China. It's going to be much harder to entice the North Koreans to come back to the table.
Right. So the end goal, though it's the same, we have to think about the process because we're really dealing with a new North Korea indeed. Now, America, the United States, has also left room for talks with North Korea. Do you see a summit or any high-level contact between Washington and Pyongyang in the year 2026?
So I think that there is probably 50 to 60% chance right now that we could see some sort of meeting between President Trump and the North Korean leader in 2026. Clearly, President Trump wants it. Kim Jong-un has not completely declined it. He's laid out conditions for a meeting. So I think both are saying that they want to meet. The conditions and the situation has to be right for them to do that. Obviously, at least the plan now is for President Trump to go to the region again in April, to go to China. That might be the opportunity where the two would meet. But at the same time, one would hope some preparatory work would be done in advance of that to avoid the sort of outcome we had in Hanoi in Vietnam in 2019. I don't think anybody wants to see that happen again. Now, having said all that, if Trump, who is not famous for preparation, says, "Look, I just want to meet him. I'll meet him like on 24 hours notice, and it'll just be good to stay in touch." There's also something to be said for that. I mean, we have had no contact with North Korea throughout the 4 years of the Biden administration, the first year of the Trump administration. So having some sort of contact with the leadership is not necessarily a bad thing. If anything, just to keep the situation stable and not escalatory.
But then, Dr. Cha, in order to make this meeting materialize, actually, what kind of role do you think South Korea could actually play in between?
So here's where I think, again, President Lee has demonstrated a pragmatic, non-ideological position. In the sense that I believe I read somewhere that he said that it was not absolutely crucial for South Korea to be at the table if President Trump were to re-engage with Kim Jong-un. he would let President Trump do that and hear what President Trump had to say before South Korea made its next move. This is really quite in contrast to previous South Korean governments who insisted that they needed to be in any bilateral, making it a trilateral. We saw this during Trump 1 and the previous South Korean government. So, I mean, again, I think that demonstrates a pragmaticness, a practicality, and a confidence by the South Korean government that they can let the U.S. go first. Now, having said that, having South Korea at the table in any sort of agreement with North Korea is absolutely critical. But this contact with North Korea has been in a deep freeze now for 5 years. So anything we can do to thaw it a little bit, whoever is most successful at doing that can go first, and then the rest of us can sort of, gather later and figure out what the next steps would be.
So these new stands by the administration could show how much it's trusting the alliance with Washington. Now, finally, Dr. Chow, when we look ahead, 2026 will be a pivotal year for South Korea. It faces overlapping challenges like tariffs, security, North Korea, U.S.-China rivalry as well. So in your view, what direction should Seoul's diplomacy with Washington take in the year ahead?
So certainly has to focus on implementing the joint fact sheet, agreeing on the first installment of the $20 billion investment in the United States, working on OPCON transition, working on Japan, Korea, and U.S.-Japan-Korea trilateral relations, and then trying to manage or balance a nuanced relationship with China. On the one hand, we all understand how important China is to South Korea. Geography never changed, and China is the biggest country right as South Korea's neighbor. On the other hand, there are many things that China is doing that is concerning. It's using economic coercion. It has in the past against South Korea. It is not supportive of the nuclear submarine agreement with the United States. It continues to support North Korea and does not support UN sanctions. And China is doing things in the provisional measure zone, in the PMZ, in the Yellow Sea or West Sea off the Korean Peninsula. So these things are not things that can be easily ignored. So I think one of the most important things in 2026 is South Korea's assessment of the strategic value of China to South Korea, even as it pushes forward with the relationship with the United States.
So definitely a packed agenda for the year 2026, and how South Korea navigates it should shape the region for years to come. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Dr. Chow. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.